All right, Joe, thank you so much for being here. Let's dive in. Start off, tell us what you do. One, tell us what you do and what got you into this work.
Absolutely. So Jessica, the day-to-day for me is I'm an executive coach and mentor. So I go out there and I help senior leaders and business owners, especially in the financial services space, to get unblocked and move through the stuff that is holding them back from growth.
Uh-huh.
I help scale practices and do that by removing what we call the operational drag. I got
Uh-huh.
into this based on my experience. I spent 25 years in financial services and did everything from the mailroom up through C-suite. I've even owned a couple practices, built those, scaled them, and sold them to the level that I wanted them to be at, as well as an insurance agency, and just really have a passion for helping other people get there as well.
Amazing. So, one of the things I know that you use to help people to get there, meaning grow their business, scale their business, is something you called the STAR Scalability Method. Tell me if I'm getting that right. I would love for you to give us a high-level overview, talk to us about as much or little of it as you'd like, but I'd love to hear what that looks like.
Absolutely. So, STAR Scalability, and you did get that correct, is a methodology for really evaluating your business and figuring out what it needs first. I've seen too many coaches and business advisors that have come into practices, especially in these really regulated industries like
Mm,
financial services and investments, and just try to put in a template for success. And unfortunately, it doesn't work because they haven't evaluated the foundation the business was built on.
mm,
So what the STAR method does is it really starts with, first of all, aligning the strategy, and aligning that with your personal values as well as the business values you've established, and then helping to transform your team to make sure that your team is working on the
mm.
same values that you are and that you are using your team effectively. I've seen so much operational drag come through from people that just aren't comfortable delegating or don't know how and when to delegate.
Uh-huh.
So, getting that team into the right spot, getting the right people in the right place, making sure that the people are there for the right reasons.
Hmm.
That's all very important. And then we do an asset assessment, and that's every asset. That's your technology, your physical assets, your proprietary knowledge and information. And we really say, are we leveraging all of it to the best of our abilities? Because
Mm.
again, there's so many people that want to sell us a service or a tool that sometimes we end up with so many things we don't need.
Uh-huh.
And then we focus all that on the reward system. How do we generate the rewards we want? And I am very anti-results.
Uh-huh.
You'll never hear me say results because
Uh-huh.
results can be negative. If you focus on a negative result, you're going to get a negative result.
Mm-hmm.
We focus on rewards, and that really speaks to everybody's value system, but that reward has to be important and tied to that value system and that strategy.
Okay, so I have questions about Star, but as you were talking, I was thinking, so because you're talking about like some templates and like people come in and they try to just, kind of do a cookie cutter thing. But also, I'm curious about like from the client perspective. A lot of times clients show up and they have a they have a perception of what they think that they need. And then I met a lot, at least in my experience, client shows up, they're like, this is my problem. And I can see, oh, behind it, here's what's actually going on. Here's what's really needed. So do you have a sense when you come in, client saying, I need help scaling, I think, like, is there a standard, like, or a top 5, 10, like, here's kind of what I'm struggling with to scale my business or where I'm stuck. They think that they know what the problem is. And you're like, here's what's actually happening.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, tell
Most
me.
of the time, what I have found is that what the client is saying their problem is more of a symptom than the cause.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you just have to look and not ask the question of how fast can we scale. We have
Mm,
to say, why are we scaling? And that answers all of the questions along the way as to where the drag is coming from.
uh-huh.
Um, I've worked with one business in particular that's coming to mind at the moment where the business owner, it was a retail distribution company. It actually wasn't even in financial services, but it was a
Hmm.
retail distribution company, and she wanted to expand into more markets, and she wanted to have all this growth because somebody at a conference was telling her she had untapped market, and she hated what
Uh-huh.
she was doing, hated
Uh-huh.
it because she felt like she couldn't get where she needed to be. Her team wasn't on board. There was a lot of tension. And when we really stopped and said, why do you want to scale? And why did you build the business first before you even want to scale? It was all about time and value to her for
Mm.
her family and the people she loved. So we refocused her there, taught her how to delegate better, and before you knew it, she actually did end up expanding. She put those growth plans on hold, but she ended up expanding into more markets and doing it in 18 months compared to the 5 years she had invested up to that point. But she ended up working less hours, making more money, and got into the markets she wanted.
Not mad about that. What you're talking
Right?
about here, though, Joe, is this is not uncommon with anyone listening, even if you're not scaling a business. So often well, I'll speak for myself also. And a lot of the people that I work with tend to be high achiever types and we call recovering perfectionist types.
Mhm.
So it's so easy to focus on some imaginary rule book and all of the shoulds of here's how you're supposed to run a business, here's how you're supposed to run your life, and you lose sight of why did I even start doing this? Why was this even my goal, whatever that was, or why did I even want to do this business? And so when you start there, is that because you mentioned before in the STAR method that you um, get into like the value and the value alignment? So is that is there a process that you use to help people like anchor into what is the real North Star so that you're not sort of like losing your way and then like the tail's wagging the dog?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So we obviously have some very pointed questions that we go into, and I drive everybody crazy because I ask them why, why,
Yeah.
why. You really got to get down to it. And the idea of I want to make more money is not a why. What do you want to do
Yeah.
with the money? Okay, what's it going to
Right.
do for you? What's it going to do for the people you love?
Uh-huh.
And then I want to get into the details of that. Don't tell me I want to retire comfortably. Well, what does that look like for you?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Especially the folks in financial services will understand this. When you're doing a financial plan, you dive into those whys with your clients. You
Right.
don't just say, okay, you want X amount for retirement. You say, what do you want to do with that money?
Right.
And we have to do the same thing for our businesses. And
Yep.
so many people overlook that and they think they can just band-aid it together.
Hmm.
And they also don't really get a good grasp of what the business is worth outside of their own control and outside of their own mind. You know, so many of them are using this as a potential retirement vehicle, for example,
Hmm.
and no idea what it's really worth. They know what it's
Yeah.
worth to them, but not to somebody else. And so we
Right.
go through all of that.
Uh-huh. Well, what was coming up as you said that, I was thinking about delegation, and actually, the client that I was working with right before we jumped on here was talking like a growth edge for her was to start delegating more in business and in life, honestly. And what she found on the personal side, she was like, "Oh, it actually turned out better than if I had been the one doing it." But I think so often with business owners, with leaders, we
Mhm.
think I can do it the best, right? Like we struggle with delegation. So like this, I think this contribute. What is the language you called it? Operational drag, right?
Operational drag.
Like I have to do it all. And so when you think about like, oh, what's it worth outside of your control? But also when you think about what's the value that could happen if I wasn't trying to control all of the things, sometimes it ends up even better than what we could do it on our own.
That's very true. And, so many of us that have built businesses from the ground up will
Mhm.
be able to relate to this. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. You are the business, at
Yeah.
least at some point. And you put your heart and soul into it and you do all the lead generation, you do the product, the service, whatever it is you're offering, you do all the operations, the marketing.
Hmm.
Every component is
Hmm.
you.
Yep.
And even as you grow and hire people to support that, letting go of the decision-making process, overseeing it,
Hmm.
is actually the hardest part for many folks. Um,
Mm.
I worked with an RIA recently that had a very robust team in every different department, but the CEO still just couldn't let go of the decision-making authority. So everybody was just, he hired great professionals, but everybody ended up being a data entry person because they didn't have the authority and the autonomy to make the decisions. And the CEO ended up being the bottleneck and being the operational drag.
Yeah. Do you work I mean, I don't know if this is part of your business, but in supporting people, because I work with a lot of CEOs and leaders, and it can be really hard. Like when you talk about like the value and value alignment, this is what's coming to mind is uh also CEOs have a certain talent, right? They have a talent for like vision, big ideas, visionary, great problem solvers, like incredibly resilient in adaptability. Like, okay, that didn't work. What's this? What's this? What's this? And tend to assume that everyone on their team should also be the same. They have the same vision and they can sort of, right? And so, and then CEOs tend to get disappointed because they're not carbon, their people are not carbon copies of them. So I imagine that becomes and somewhat like these are some of the constraints in growing and scaling. So how do you support people in that area? Or do you? I like let me
Oh,
assume. Tell me, is that something you do and how do you do
no,
it?
absolutely. So, there's quite a few things that we do there, and I don't want to bog us down for hours, but high
Mhm.
level,
Yeah.
the first thing we're going to do is talk about what does success and failure look like in that
Mhm.
decision-making process, and do we have a formal decision-making process?
Mhm.
You can't ask somebody to step in and be a carbon copy of you if you
Yeah.
don't give them a decision-making model to use.
Uh-huh.
Okay. You have to find the right one that works for their business. We all know there's dozens of them out there, if not hundreds,
Mhm.
and there's thousands of opinions. So we have to
Mhm.
definitely find one that everybody's comfortable with
Mhm.
as, the leadership of the firm and what's going to be the expectation. The
Mhm.
next thing we have to do is put parameters around that and say to the staff that we are now delegating to, here is where your autonomy is. Here is your level of authority. These are the decisions you can make. These are the decisions that still need other input. And really make sure that everything is super clear. Because as long as it's clear up front, there's no gray area. There's no room for people to fail.
Yeah. Well, I
And
like
that's
that. There's no way for people to fail. We love a good guarantee. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I also think as you're saying that, like I think about things, from a mindset perspective, and it's also level setting your expectations, right?
absolutely.
So when you're like, okay, I'm really clear about what I want, and my expectation isn't that they should just know what I want, right?
Right.
If I can just be really clear, because sometimes I hear this a lot of, I don't want to micromanage, right? Because again, think about leaders who they value autonomy, they value freedom, they have big ideas, so they don't want someone telling them what to do. So then when they're putting these clear parameters and guidelines, their brain's like, no, we don't want this. We want all this freedom and autonomy. And you're like, yeah, but you get so much. If you give them a container to be in, then they can go free and autonomous inside that container. And that sounds a little bit about what you are supporting people to do is hold that tension of containment and then liberty inside of the containment.
And with delegation, that's a great point. But with delegation, the one thing I really like to tell people as an example, especially in financial services, again, because we talk about the 80-20 rule so much,
Mhm.
right? In that business, they say, the general idea is about 80% of your revenues are coming from about 20% of your base.
Mhm.
Okay. And the people that are, taking 20% of your work are generating most of your income. Well, it's true with your staff as well. Okay. Your 80-20 with your staff, though, in delegating is that you have to understand that about 20% of the time, they're not going to make the exact same decision you made.
Mhm.
But what is that 20% really worth when you compare it to the other 80?
Right. Right. You're like, am I willing? Is that a price I'm willing to pay? Like to buy back my time? Essentially.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Getting some of something or all of nothing is what it ends up
Yeah.
coming back down to.
Oof. All right. Okay. So, all right, I want to also talk about the lessons, right? Like most leaders, most business owners, like we have moments or like 10 where we are sort of smacked in the face with some lessons. So, talk to me about like the personal experiences or mindset shifts that have changed how you lead today in your own business.
Oh, wow. So over the course of the last 25 years, there's been a lot of them. I've been fortunate to work for some really great leaders, but I've also worked for some that I would not choose to work for again. We'll just put it
Uh-huh.
that way. Um, but I've gotten to see what works and what doesn't. And unlike, a lot of folks out there, I don't rely on just one experience or just one degree, from an educational perspective. I have a varied background, and I think that's what's kind of unique. Now, with that being said, how has my own personal style changed? I have become much more empathetic over the years.
Mm.
Much.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely started as a management style leader. It was KPIs and factual data, yes, no, and forget your emotions.
Uh-huh.
And I realized the hard way over the years, over the years, I lost some good staff when I was in management roles until I realized that I did have to focus on that emotional intelligence component and be empathetic. And once I realized that and learned how to apply that, everything changed. Everything changed in my success as a leader in other firms and with owning my own businesses. It was just a game changer.
Yeah, if you get like, I'm curious what, because listen, I talk about feelings all day long. We talk, what would you say? I mean, and this isn't going to be a fair question because there's probably a lot, but if you're like, this is one of the things that I noticed was the biggest shift in terms of how I should, if I led with empathy or I included that, if that mattered, if taking like human emotional experiences into consideration mattered, if you're like, this is kind of the top thing that shifted in how I showed up as a leader, what does that look like?
So I think the top shift, if I had to pick one, really is just my ability to lead in general,
Yeah.
because it really helped people buy into what I was saying. Okay.
Mm,
As a leader, in other firms and even in my own companies, I found it hard to get people on board with my vision and
uh-huh.
to want to be proactive in their roles when they didn't believe in me or felt that I wasn't connected to them.
Hmm.
By getting more emotionally involved, being more empathetic, and just treating them with respect, and
Hmm.
recognizing that even though they didn't own the company, that they were still an important part of it.
Yep.
That really made a tremendous difference with getting them on board. So when I said, hey guys, we need to work on this project, it didn't become a fight. It was, okay, great. Where do we start? And here's some great ideas I have. And that's what you want from your team. You want your team saying, okay, there's a pivot or a shift. Wonderful. Here's some wonderful ideas I have. And they're going to bring you the right information.
Yeah. What's coming to mind is a client, I think we just, maybe I just saw her yesterday, and we were talking about the difference between, because sometimes when you're trying to hold staff accountable, or if you're like, you're not meeting the expectations of the position and the needs of the company is struggling because of this. Uh, and, and, and what I was pointing out was it's different. It's being able to meet somebody and reflect like, hey, I see like your feelings matter, basically. Like I see that you're having an emotional experience. I see that you're frustrated, or I see that you feel unsupported. I can empathize with the emotion and I can still have an expectation of the behavior, right? A separate conversation. So what you're saying with empathy, like I can meet you in your emotional experience and acknowledge that. And that doesn't mean that there aren't still very clear expectations of what your role is here. How's this business going to grow and do what it's meant to do if we're not, firing all cylinders? But I think sometimes leaders get scared, quote unquote scared, to bring in that human aspect
Mhm.
because they're like, I have to hold them accountable. And if I meet their emotions, it's like I'm letting them off the hook.
Yes.
Yeah.
I do hear that a lot. And the
Uh-huh.
one thing I hear the most, and I think is a terrible misconception in just leadership in general,
Hmm.
is I hear people like CEOs and owners of the firms come to me all the time and say, well, I don't want to be a babysitter, or I'm not here to hold somebody's hand.
Hmm.
And I'm like, emotional intelligence and empathetic leadership are not coddling people or patting them on the head. It's just treating them with the respect you would want in return.
Right.
It's being kind, it's understanding that life happens to all of us outside of work,
Hmm.
and then separating the performance of the work from the person as a whole. Right?
Mm-hmm.
That really is very important. And just making that small mind shift difference can really change the relationship that a CEO has with their staff.
Yeah. Well, and I think it can go both way. I think also when you separate the person from the performance, it can even help for those who struggle with like people pleasing and over empathizing. It can help when you separate, the person still gets their goodness gets to remain intact. And they might still need some accountability, or you might have to have hard conversations about behavior. And that doesn't negate the goodness of the person. It just means like, hey, your behaviors might not be well suited here. That's really hard for
Absolutely.
people. Yeah. Is that part of is like, this might be another unfair question. Part of the STAR scaling method, is it also the ruling out of people, like the letting go? Yeah. How do you support? Because that can be really hard. That,
So yeah,
huh?
it's tough sometimes when you come in and you have to say to somebody, look, I know this person's worked for you for years, but they're not the right fit and you need to let them go
Hmm.
or reassign them, depending on what
Hmm.
the situation may be. How do I support that? I think I have a great story from just the last couple of months. I'm working with a client right now who's actively a client going through the process with me. She owns a financial practice, and she had somebody that was on staff for about 3 years with her and was her operations manager. And he was a very nice man. incredibly kind and very skilled in certain areas, but he just didn't have what it took and what she needed to grow her business.
Mm-hmm.
She needed somebody with very specific skills, and he just
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately did not have them. He got her to where she was, but he couldn't take her to the next step.
Mm.
So instead of coming in here and saying, "Hey, you need to fire him,"
Uh-huh.
because nobody likes that. As
Mm.
CEOs, I've never met a single CEO that enjoyed firing people.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I know I never enjoyed terminating someone because, again, we're all humans. We all
Yep.
know what that means. So we went out and we said to this person, we had a conversation, sat down together. I sat down as well and said, let me be involved so I can help you through this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
We sat down and we said to him, look, this just isn't working. We've explained to you what we need you to do. You're not delivering. We really like you. So we actually helped him partner up with a local recruiting agency
Mm-hmm.
because he did want to stay local.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually worked with the recruiting agency to work with him to give him time off from work. We paid for helping get his resume done and everything else so that the owner of the financial practice felt good about letting him go.
Mm-hmm.
And we got him to move on quickly. And he's in a new job. And he actually sent her a thank you note about a week ago, thanking her for helping him find the new job and how successful he was.
I was gonna say
And
it's probably happier. Like people, I
he's
just did an
happier,
episode on like fear of moving
happier.
on.
It's
Like,
awesome.
right? Like, y- right when
Yeah.
you let go of something that's not well suited, like it's a good chance that it's the highest good of all involved, right? Like if it's not
It is.
working for you, there's a really good chance that it's not working for them either. And as the leader, like this is the hard truth. Like sometimes as leader, you go first. Like it's gonna be
Absolutely.
hard. And
Absolutely. It is your job as leader to go first. Because, I mean,
yeah.
this poor guy was trying to be loyal to his job, so he didn't have time to go look. He didn't
Uh-huh.
have the skill set to
Hmm.
look the right way. So, for a few $100s, literally, a few $100s, we were able to get the CEO of this practice to feel good about this decision and then help an employee move on to something that was even better for him. And he's making more money and he's happier. I mean, it really was a win-win for everybody. And stories like that are why I love doing this.
Yeah. So we're kind of talking, we talked a little bit like myth busting sort of thing. So I think that when like part of growth is learning new skills, yes. I also think that part of growth is unlearning some things. So what's a belief or a habit, something that you had to ditch or overcome, let go of, release to grow your business in a way that actually felt aligned?
So I think the biggest thing that was the hardest to let go of
Uh-huh.
was that you don't have to follow the model everybody else is following. We all hear all the
Yeah.
time that
Uh-huh.
you've got to just do it this way because somebody else success doing it. Well,
Mhm.
okay, that's great for some people, but if it didn't align with my value system, and
Uh-huh.
it didn't work for me. Like even building my financial practice, my last financial practice, um, I had constant advice from the firm I had partnered with and everybody you meet at every seminar. There's somebody on stage telling you how you're going to be the next multimillionaire.
Yeah.
And they're, the
Yep.
conventional wisdom was grind more, grind more, grind more, right? And
Uh-huh.
kind of the financial services way. Well, for me, I didn't start that business
Hmm.
to turn around and sell it for a tremendous amount of money.
Right.
I started that business because I was caring for a family member that had cancer and I needed flexibility and to work less hours.
Yeah.
So that's what my business gave me. But what was interesting was I never intended to build that business for sale. I intended it to be a short time, uh, you know, fill in the gap type of business.
Hmm.
I actually ended up selling it for far more than I ever thought I would. It
Hmm.
allowed me the flexibility to then go out and do what I wanted, and it gave me the runway to do that. And that's what I mean about going back to everything being based on your value system.
Yep.
Because if I had just followed the method and the process, I would have been placing 200 calls a day for 60 to 80 hours a week and been miserable and not achieving the goals I had set out to achieve.
Yeah. It can be so hard, especially for like any of the new business owners like listening to this is yeah, you go out. I mean, some of it's wise. You're like, hey, learn from the people who've gone before you. But it's the what is it like just the rinse and repeat? Like everybody wants to sell you a process, right? And so they believe in their way, and it can be really hard because then you end up getting edited out of your own business. And then it starts to feel terrible. That's why it starts to feel like a grind. You're like, why am I doing this anyway? Right. And we start to, you're like, who wants to scale this business? I just want to get out of it. And go back to that.
Exactly.
You know, go back to the 9 to 5. You like start to dream about it. It was so easy. But really, when it's so fascinating, I know for me, I've experienced that in my business where, listen, I was a good student, right? I was like, you just tell me the step 1 through 5, y'all, I got this. And then you're like, oh, this is like an ill-fitted, itchy sweater. It's like the white one with the birds on it that my grandma gave me when I was 8. Like, this is not me. And then you wonder why your business isn't growing. Like, oh, well, maybe because I forgot to be home to my business. But it can be so scary to be like, oh, I could just do this my way, but these people are telling me this is the right way. Yeah. But it sounds to me like the star scalability, you're intentionally bringing the human back into it. Like we're not just trying to give you, here's a cookie cutter. It's let's bring
That's
you and part of the guiding light in this.
That's right.
Yeah.
STAR scalability is a little bit different than most of the other coaching methodologies you're going to see because most of the other coaching methodologies are come in and say, do this step one, step two, step three, and you're going to be a
Mm-hmm.
success in a year.
Mm-hmm.
And then people get frustrated and they wonder
Mm-hmm.
why it didn't work. I will tell you the overwhelming majority of my clients are people who have worked with a coach in the past and it didn't work.
Yeah.
STAR is a little different because STAR starts with why are you doing it? What do you want from it? And what do you already have in place? And is it working?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you've got stuff that's working or working partially the way it needs to be,
Yeah.
let's get that refined. Let's build
Keep
on your
doing what works. We
yes,
forget that. Yeah.
build on what's successful.
Yeah.
Don't just throw something new at
Yeah.
it. And
Uh-huh.
that's really what it's all about is figuring out what the foundation is before you build a house on top of it.
Yeah. Well, and this might be along the same lines, but sort of in this spirit of unlearning, is there a piece of advice that you hear in the industry that you're like, I really wish people would stop believing this?
How long do we have?
What? The
uh,
sequel. Uh-huh.
um, so I think that the biggest thing that I would say is sort of a myth, especially, for my financial services and insurance people out there.
Mhm.
You don't have to grind more to make more or to get more.
Yeah.
You just have to use what you have better. You don't
Mm.
have to work 80 hours a week to be able to make however many millions of dollars a year you want. Whatever your goal is,
Mhm.
you need to figure out first what's working for you and how to maximize what's working before you start adding anything else on and
Mhm.
get back to the core of why you started your business. If
Yeah.
you loved doing sales, but now you're not doing sales, well, let's get you back into sales. If you
Hmm.
wanted more time with your family, but you're not having it, let's get you back to your family. And you'll find that success will follow when you're doing the right thing and the ethical thing.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that because when in my career prior to my coaching career, I ran jail diversion programs and I was in leadership positions and I was like, I miss direct care. I was like, when is the last time I had a session with a client, right? Like I'm overseeing the clinicians and I'm doing consultations and stuff. And so I was like, I really miss that. And again, my first year in business, did I replace my day job salary? Yes, I did. Right. Like there's something to be said about anchoring into your desire. And so maybe along those lines, I want to, because the word I about said was alignment, aligning. And I think that word, like, it's kind of like a buzzword. It's like authenticity, right? Like we love a good buzzword, but
Mhm.
what's your take? Because you kind of mentioned that, like anchoring in to yourself. But so tell us, like, how do you define alignment in business and maybe how do you catch yourself when you fall out of it?
So with alignment, you're right. It is sort of a catchphrase word that we hear a lot, and the reality is though it does have value. As much as we want to say we want to avoid as many catchphrases as possible, some of them do have value. That's why they exist. That's why they become popular.
Mhm.
So alignment for me is focused more on my time. Time is the most valuable commodity to me. If you tell me, Joe, you can make a $500 million a year and never see the people that are important to you, or you can make $1 million a year and have the flexibility to do what you want when you want. I'm going to go with the $1 million option every time. And
Mhm.
that's what I do with my CEOs as well. Is I say, okay, the time is the one thing you can't get back. Time is the most important commodity. Let's make sure your time is aligned with A, your values, and B, your skills and what you want to do.
Mhm.
Because if I'm saving you 20% time, for example,
Mhm.
you can now take that 20% and either have it for, your loved ones, or you can take that 20% and devote it to another project if that's what you want to do. But the point is, it's now your commodity to use how you want. And that's what I do for my own business and my own life as well. I sit down at least once every 90 days and do an assessment and an audit on my time to figure
Yeah.
out if I'm putting in my time where I want to be and
Hmm.
is my time aligning with why I started this business in the first place.
Yeah. What you just hit on there, I think this is something that I notice we tend to overlook a lot is that time to do the reflection, the look back. Like I set out to do this thing. Now let me actually check and balance. Like, am I doing? Is it working? But I think a lot of people don't do it. You can maybe weigh in on this, but I think because people are scared, they don't want to, they don't want to see, right? But we like there's a, if when we do that, it gives us information. We have opportunities to then recalibrate, iterate. If I'm not aligned in the way that I want to be, I can actually make some changes. It just requires people to trust themselves enough to, right? Like people are like, I don't want to look at this because I know I'm not going to do anything about it. So I don't even look at it. But I think for me, that's one of my favorite things. I do them on a daily, like even daily check-ins of a look back because I want to stay, I want to get back to that center point as quickly as possible. And like the few degree turns and suddenly we're like, oh my gosh, I'm 90 degrees away from what the whole point was here. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and again, like you, I will, evaluate on a day-by-day basis, but like I said, once every 90 days,
Uh-huh.
I sit down and I actually put myself through the same checklist for alignment on time value
Uh-huh.
that I put all of my clients through as well.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that I'm leading from the front,
Yeah.
you know?
Love that. So if there's somebody listening and you're like, if there was nothing else that you took away that you would want someone to hear, like somebody who is like, this is my ideal client who's sitting out there listening to me, what's like the key thing? Like, don't leave this conversation without taking this with you. What would you say?
So if I had to think of just sort of the one thing that everybody has to take away, I would just say you don't have to scale like everybody else, but you
Mhm.
do need to scale with intention. And
Mm,
that's the most important thing to keep in mind. Um, the success, your definition of success needs to be yours.
hmm do you find that people struggle with that?
Oh, absolutely.
Like,
What I find is, especially, in any of the service related businesses, not
uh-huh.
not just financial services, but especially any service related business.
Yeah.
Um, we all spend so much time going to these conferences and learning events and whatnot. And there's always somebody on stage that is the star.
Uh-huh.
They're the highest producing advisor, the most successful agent, the mortgage broker who's closed the most deals. There's always somebody on the stage that's super successful saying, you could be like me next year if.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's not in line with your value system, you will never reach that. And all you will do is make yourself feel bad for not reaching it. And
Right.
that's why I say you don't have to scale like everyone else, but you do need to do it with intention.
Yeah. Like that's just like good words to live by for your whole life, right? Like
Absolutely.
however you're gonna just like do it with intention. You don't have to carbon copy the other people. Ready, set, go. But it can be really scary, right? Because you're like, again, I go back to people don't when they're like, I don't know what it looks like, right? It's that I don't know, right? But listen, my mentor was always like, that's not an option. If you say, I don't know, it's like, trust that somewhere you do. You don't know the how because you've never created it before. And I think like that's with this, like somebody who's scaling, like if they've never created that, I'm going to say result, they've never created that reward before. Um, but so they're like, I don't know the how. And you're like, yeah, that's amazing. If you don't know the exact how, that means you're actually doing something that you've never done before. And that's actually really exciting, or it could be. Yeah. Uh-huh. Okay, I'll get off my soap. I'll get really excited over here. Before I ask you the very last question, Joe, please tell the listeners what's the best way that they can connect with you and the work that you're doing out there.
So the easiest way to find me is, don't go sorting through social media and everything. Just go right to my website, everything you need there to contact me and even learn a little bit more about Star Scalability. And my website is jpcoachingnow.com.
All right, I'll be sure to include that in the show notes. And Joe, for the last question, this is what I like to ask all my guests. What does it mean to you to live an unblocked life?
I think, a lot of it comes back to some of the products and things that we've talked about with with the STAR Scalability Method.
Hmm.
Some of the things that are produced from that, I should say, that value system that aligns with your value system. So when you're unblocked, you're living your life in a way that doesn't create more chaos for you. You're creating peace, you're creating your definition of success. And to me, that's what it's like to be unblocked in business.
Yeah, I'm like, I need a shirt. No more chaos. That feels right. I like make it a t-shirt. No more chaos.
Right?
Amazing. Thank you, Joe, for your insights, your wisdom. I appreciate you sharing your experiences and the phenomenal skills that you and tools that you're using out there in the world to help people grow a business that's actually, the language I use, like it's a self-led, it's a self-focused, it's a self-directed business, and I'm here for that. So thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you for having me, Jessica. It's been a lot of fun.
Amazing.